Right. Interesting insight in regards to the Thomas Tuchel hiring and the backlash that he's got, right? So the backlash is no English managers, or it's a shame that English managers haven't been hired. And then in Sky Sports pointed out, obviously, a lot of data in regards to there's basically no English managers to pick from. And the four English managers that are to pick from, three of them will be in a relegation battle pretty much all season, and one isn't available. Now, the biggest reason for, I feel like, the lack of English kind of like talent or whatever at the managerial level uh, is obviously the influx of foreign managers, which came because of the influx of foreign players. Uh, and the biggest problem is the cultural differences, right? So this has got nothing to do with like race or whatever. Well, it's obviously a heavy, deep ass topic, but it's more of a cultural aspect, right? So we all know obviously about racism in football, but if we think about it on a cultural aspect, I find it that older, so say English men over 50 years old, I feel like they grew up in a in a bubble, right? In an English UK bubble for the majority of their lives, and culturally are probably not as expanded as your foreign managers from Spain, from Italy, Germany, etc., or they're just not as comfortable in those scenarios. So maybe they have the knowledge, they have the intelligence, they have the tactical know-how, they have everything that all these other managers have, right? But it's about being able to command a room full of like a multicultural room, and it's not, and this can come from like it's something that you either just like have or you don't, right? And I think it's definitely an exposure thing. So as we see, and this is the interesting point, English managers have had this issue, right? Because the manager age bracket for the majority is probably around about 50, right, as the average. Let's say your average English manager is 50 years old, right? Like that human being has missed out through this kind of like social media and internet like revolution in regards to being culturally plugged in from a young age, right? Being plugged into all these different, scrolling through all these different things, connecting, talking, messaging, etc., etc. Whereas the younger British football players, because if you're a football player and you're English, your average age isn't 50, right? It's probably 23 or something, right? So as a 23-year-old English football player, you have grown up, whether it's multiculturalism in the city that you've grown up in, or if you've grown up in the in the countryside or whatever, or not in the city, you like you grow up in a village or a town in the countryside outside of a city. Those kids now are like city kids 20 years ago in regards to their exposure to culture. And you see this with McLaren, for example, in Jamaica, right? Like, that guy's obviously hasn't got a racist bone in his body, but it will never be comfortable culturally for him just to like be part of it, right? I think a younger manager would be able to just slot into the culture a lot easier. Like, it's about the comfortability of the human being, and we can feel that as a team. So I feel like the biggest issue is a cultural issue, and that's just a generational thing. So the younger English managers have basically the Graham Potter managed Chelsea, and who went, who was abroad, etc. And Eddie Howe, as if you see Newcastle as kind of like an emerging top team, and Eddie Howe also has that ability to be comfortable and be able to command from a multicultural dressing room. And not just command, but be able to actually understand them all on like an interpersonal level, and actually be able to connect with them and not feel kind of ostracized from the group to a certain extent. Like the way that McLaren is being kind of introduced into the Jamaican setup, there's like comedy around it. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like this old English guy that doesn't really know what he's saying or doing, and they're like, "Oh, say this, do this." Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you got I don't know, say Cole Palmer finishes his career and wants to become a manager, and I know that's like an easy one to say, but these young like white English kids are gonna have no problem at all assimilating to Jamaican, to Caribbean culture, to African culture, to any Arab cultures, etc. So there's just this more even playing field and more comfortability with the youth, right? And the youth are only represented on the football pitch. They're not represented on the bench yet as managers because they're not of age yet. So it's a generational thing. And like I said, you see it in little patches with Graham Potter and Eddie Howe, where the younger ones have been given more of an opportunity at the higher levels to a certain extent. And I feel like that's what it comes down to. And when Sam Allardyce said, if my name was da-da-da-da-da, I would... When he said, if my name was Samuel Aladicio or whatever, I'd get like the top jobs. And he's like, no, because if your name was Samuel Aladicio and you still walked in and you were still, all right, lads, however the hell he talks, right? If you were still that kind of like just burly Northern Midlands guy that, it still just wouldn't work because you're just that guy. Like, you have to think about, to extrapolate it away from football. When older English people travel abroad, they're just seen as like they want to do the English things, like, and they're not very cultured. They don't want to really assimilate to the local way in any shape or form on their holidays or trips. Or that was the case for the longest time. So if that's how everyone saw English people when they travelled onto the continent in Europe and abroad. And if everything that was put in the media, on the news about English people abroad or English football fans abroad, and the way that English people have represented themselves at times abroad and football fans, right, in terms of the cultural aspects, then those things are baked into players' minds, into owners' minds. Like, these things are irrelevant, and that's why they don't get the top jobs. It's simple as that. It's the English culture doesn't translate into a dressing room full of X amount of people. There's not much charisma that comes with these English guys, really, in my opinion. I think, you can say like Harry Redknapp, etc. But yeah, I think it's just perception and comfortability. And that's why the English managers, don't get that job. Tuchel will be so much more comfortable in this England role than any of like the heaviness that it is for like Southgate or these English managers. It's such a heavy burden, and I feel like Tuchel can hopefully see it. It's going to be a dynamic defensive style way of playing, I imagine, to a certain extent. But yeah, it's a smart. It says, like I put here, Tuchel smart choice. It's a club break for Tuchel, and I think if it had took like the Man United job, for example, which is obviously not a great job to take right this second in the middle of this season, but if it had taken a club job and failed, then it would be looking a little bit tricky for him in regards to having a job at the top shelf of clubs. So I feel like then he might have to drop down to like the next level down, right? Which is maybe you'd see him managing like, I don't know, Lazio or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Things like that, which is not obviously. But anyway, you get my point. But I feel like it's smart to take the England job because if you do really well, then you bang straight to the top again with your Liverpools and Barcelonas and cities and Madrids and Bayerns and Juves and stuff like that, right? So you're back in that echelon after doing well with England, whether that's winning it or get to final and whatever. And if you don't do too well with England, you've had like a 3-year break or whatever from, or 2-3 year break from club football. And if we get to a quarter or a semi, then teams will still be you'd have like your performances at Bayern and PSG at times and Chelsea at times. People will have forgotten, right? We move on quickly, so it's a good break for him from club football. It's a smart choice. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. culturally, culturally, England's improving in regards to their understanding of the rest of the world and how the social norms from different cultures and religions and races, etc. So the players now are a lot more comfortable on that stage. You see your Judes and Fodens and Cole Palmers and even like Declan Rice, who would be your quote unquote like Brexit kind of football like London like guy. And maybe it's unfair because London is so multicultural, they all grow up around it. But I don't know, like your John Stones, for example, players like that, like from the north, they're so in tune with the world culture and what's going on everywhere, and in tune with the norms and the social understandings. So the youth that are being represented on the football pitch, they understand it, and they're a lot more comfortable in these tournaments. A lot more comfortable than your superstars from the golden generation were culturally. And I think you see those problems with like Lampard when he might sound great to English press, right? Lampard sounded great to English press when he's talking English to no one, because he's not having a conversation with a Moroccan, is he? Do you know what I mean? And trying to get a Moroccan on his side. Like, when's Frank Lampard in his life ever had to get a Moroccan on his side, like Ziyech maybe, right? Never. Like culturally, it's a thing. It's a big gap. No matter how well you do, how much tactical knowledge you have, which in itself is so overhyped. Like, master tactician is such a hilarious term. It's like master kids colouring book. Tactics it's such a like closed box in football. Like, there's only so many formations, there's only so many to do, there's only so many ways to segment a pitch, there's only so many gaps you can have in between lines and channels and inside channels and there's only so many formations. Do you know what I mean? It's not this complex crazy thing that everyone makes it out to be. So that's my 2 cents in it. The English over 50s, which is what mainly represents English football managers, or over 40s or whatever, aren't culturally there due to how society has developed over the years and how more sheltered it was before the internet. And when you have internet kids, when you have people born in the 90s onwards, when you have those in positions where they can maybe get managerial England jobs, then I think that then you'll start seeing more. Until then, I just can't really see a space for English managers doing well in European or Premier League football. Ta-ta, bye-bye.